The essence of King Middle School is giving kids, all kids, a very purposeful way of engaging in complex ideas, concepts, challenges, and curriculum. It's about taking curriculum which is often so dry, it's about taking it and finding how that actually fits into the context of the real world, giving kids opportunities to work with people who actually work in real disciplines in the world, not just academic disciplines, but work in applied science or in applied art or in applied design, and creating a context in which they can explore that while they build both meaningful skill sets and develop accurate comprehension of curriculum, but they're doing it all within the context of real work. It's a tricky model because it means that in order to pull that off, you need a group of 6 or 7 adults who are those kids' primary teachers. You need those adults to understand the big picture of where they want that learning to go. They have to be able to engage with the community and find the right connection. And they have to be able to think about, okay, so I'm a field biologist. Well, what is it that a field biologist does? Who's the right field biologist to get in here to work with our kids? And if we take what a field biologist does, what does that look like when a 7th grader does it? How do we modify that so it's a 7th grader activity so that 7th graders can really do that well and accomplish the sort of appearance of the same goals that a real field biologist would engage in? We adopted the expeditionary learning model at the beginning in 1993, and the laptop initiative began in 2001 or 2002. By the time the laptop initiative came out, we were already pretty well versed in what project-based learning looked like. We still had a lot of work to do. We always have a lot of work to do in this area. But that gradual process of change meant that it was a change that meant changing the culture of the school, changing the culture of changing the way educators thought about doing their work, changing the structures within the school as we began to see that certain things are too difficult to expect in a lockdown structure, finding ways to open that structure over time. We have summer planning institutes, which we've been doing for 15 years now, where almost the entire staff comes in for 3 or 4 days in the summer, works together around planning learning expeditions, critiques each other's work, talks about common resources we could share. We look at different kinds of products people are making. We talk about the learning that could happen in those products. So we've been doing that for a long time. We've had a celebration of learning for 13 or 14 years now, where at a given point in the year, at the end of the year, we put out all the learning that kids have done, all the products that kids have done. We invite educators from around the country to come and look at that work. Our kids all talk about their learning. That's been going on for a long time. By the time those laptops came out, we already had done deep multimedia work with kids, so we felt quite ready for them. In fact, we were feeling held back by not having laptops before they showed up. So when they came, it was like we hit the ground running. And when I say we, I mean some of us. So some of us in the school were doing the kinds of things that we felt like over time we wanted to see everybody doing. And that's one of the great things about the leadership structure at King. It's extremely flexible like everything else. Most of us do 2 or 3 things, and nobody cares if somebody else is doing the same thing as another person. Everybody's overlapping and working together to get the job done. When it came to looking at the best practice of learning and teaching here at the school, nobody thought about it first and did it second. Everybody here had ideas that were driven by values and sort of hunches about how learning should work. And then we started doing that, and then we started to catalog our success. And that cataloging of success led to looking at what were the practices that made that possible, and then institutionalizing those practices over time through a process of recording and documenting and doing professional development around that work. The way traditional schools are set up is they're training children and young adults to become mini professors. You've got your mini professor of English, and you've got your mini professor of science, or your mini professor of math. And that's just the model and the paradigm we're working with. But that paradigm doesn't really suit the needs of kids or the world anymore today. So one problem that we're facing is that most schools don't even realize that they're working from within a modeled framework that doesn't really make sense anymore. Then we look out and we think about, well, what's an alternative model? And we think, well, we'd like it to be more like the real world. And a lot of schools have said, we'd really like our school to be more like the real world, but they break down around structures that would support that within the school. What it takes in a lot of schools is a kind of heroic effort by a few people to pull off these complex learning experiences for kids. And we found here that heroic effort is great once in a while, but it's a burnout. So unless you find a way to support that within the structure of the school itself, you're going to burn out trying to turn your school into something that's really meaningful for kids. Most schools are divided into 40 or 50 or 60-minute blocks. They might think they're progressive if they do 80-minute blocks. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a schedule here at King Middle School where a team of 5 or 6 experts in learning, your teachers, can say, in order to pull off this particular project at this particular stage, in order to make the workflow happen that we need to accomplish with kids, we need to design a whole new schedule this week. And that's what we have here at King Middle School. There aren't any bells. Nobody actually really knows where anybody is most of the time. But that's the way real work happens, and we all know that. If we're working in the world and we're in any kind of engineering or design process, or we're editing movies, or we're making sounds, or we're doing whatever it is that people do, nobody stops after 40 minutes, puts everything down, and goes on to do something else. So flexible schedules is very key. Another piece, which is around time and time management, schools need to absolutely commit the time for planning and collaborative planning within the schedule framework so that all teachers can work together to integrate the curriculum pieces and do the basic nuts and bolts and workflow planning to make something complicated happen for 80 kids over the course of 8, 10, 12 weeks. It's not easy. It takes a lot of teamwork, which is also not easy. And it also takes an absolute commitment on the part of the school administration and the leadership to carve out that time and make it sacred for teacher planning. Another piece of the framework that's critical is you need to have the right resources in students' hands. And for us, that's been a variety of things. Not least important has been the one-to-one laptop initiative. Now, I wouldn't say it's the most important thing. I would say it's among the most important things because you also need to have the right reading resources for kids. So you have to be able to identify developmentally appropriate reading materials for all kids within topics, or else you don't really have a topic that will fly for kids. But at the same time, if you don't give them a tool like a laptop, a real professional tool that professionals would use all the time in any field, then you've taken away the opportunity for kids to act like real professionals or to produce real professional products. Anybody who's spent time working with computers knows they're actually more complicated than people would have you believe. It's difficult to know how to manage the workflow through a project. We have a teacher here in the building whose job is to work with all 7th graders and to manage that sort of workflow with kids and teach them what that looks like. And in fact, we've kind of spread that out in a lot of ways, creating lots of different production houses within the schools so that as kids pass through different curriculum areas, teachers can rely on experts in production within their own team framework to help them build those kinds of projects. So I would call that know-how. It's one thing to have the resources, but you totally need to have the know-how built into the building. We go through a process of as staff where we critique each other's work, and that's a model for how we do our work with kids as well. We know that getting to the best product for all kids means a period of revision and assessment, formative assessment, looking at kids' work. And when I say looking at kids' work, I don't mean adults looking at kids' work exclusively. I mean kids looking at kids' work based upon models that they've already looked at and seen. Our teachers produce, we call them exemplar models of the products our kids are going to make before the kids actually do it. And so often the kids look at what a teacher's made and they say, you know what, I get it and I think I could do that better. And that whole process leads to our kids also beginning to define the criteria of what a high quality product would look like. And that's not informal, we formalize that. We design rubrics and create rubrics with our kids that define what quality would look like. And then our kids work to meet their own definition of quality. That's very collaborative. So our kids work together, they do peer editing. And near the end of an expedition, sometimes there's a week or 6 or 7 days set aside just for looking at drafts and revisions to get to a high quality final product with kids. All kids learn in different ways, and we know that all kids learn at different speeds. And what we've tried to do is ask teams of teachers to think about how they can bring different kinds of media and different kinds of representations of learning into the products that they're making. We've often asked teams to think about, if you're going to do this piece around producing a document, for example, with the Taking Care of Business expedition, we've got all those kids producing business plans and making little businesses, and they're writing these things that are like official little business plans. At the same time, they're down in Joe Farrell's room producing a piece of music. And for kids who love music, that might be the hook. And for kids who love writing, which my daughter's a kid who loves writing, that's the hook too, you know. You might think of it a little bit as like a pop song. We need to make sure we have the hook in there for all the different kinds of kids and all the different kinds of learners, and we're very aware of that. We often ask that all expeditions include a piece of art that kids are producing, and we make sure that the output media of the product can hold a variety of different kinds of media, so that kids can feel proud of the piece they drew. If they're not as proud of their writing, they might think this is a great piece of art that supports it that they made. So bringing in the capacity of kids to represent curriculum in a variety of media and a variety of intelligences just makes it more possible for all kids to feel successful. We make sure that our kids feel like they're a part of a team. So our kids, they actually don't call them teams here, we call them houses. And our kids have the same houses for 2 years in a row, the same teachers, we do looping. And there's a strong commitment that every child will be known by at least one significant adult in the school. So we have crews, and the crew is only about 8 to 12 kids big. And that 8 to 12 kid group meets once a week with their crew leader, who's one of the faculty. It's not necessarily their teacher. And those groups of kids do things like initiatives together with the teacher, all kinds of different experiences. And they also manage the learning portfolio process with that particular crew teacher. And then we have teams that are just totally committed to kids treating each other respectfully. Our kids go out and do community service. Lots of our teams, whether it's expedition time or not, do volunteer work in the community. We take our 7th graders, our whole 7th grade goes out camping for 3 days. And it's all based around teamwork, communication. We have a ropes course in our gym. We're very happy to have competitive experiences for our kids, but we also try to balance that with collaboration and compassion and care for our kids. We teach those things explicitly. And I think when you come into King, I think everybody says this, the place does just have a really good vibe. It feels really good. It's not cliquey. Kids all get along with one another. And it's remarkable.
For more information about what works in public education, go to edutopia.org.